Okay, good morning or good day, or depending on where and when you're watching this this tutorial. Today, we'll be talking about the assessment requirements for work effectively with others in an automotive workplace. This is one of the core subjects in the qualification, the Certificate 2 in Automotive Vocational Preparation. There's 5 core subjects, and this is one of those. The main competencies within this particular subject are, I'll just make this screen share. The main competencies within this subject are to, well, the key outcomes, I should say, are working effectively with a range of people in an automotive workplace. It identifies or involves identifying your own and others' job roles, communicating appropriately, working in shared tasks, dealing with issues, problems and conflicts. It also applies to all of those working in the automotive repair and service sector. Key outcomes in this particular subject are for you to be able to determine your own and others' roles and job requirements, working in shared tasks, and deal effectively with issues, problems and conflicts that you might find in your work groups. So that's a quick outline of what's involved in this subject. I'll just share the PowerPoint presentation now with you, and we'll work through that page by page. So here's our first tile. As I said, work effectively with others in an auto workplace. We're just going to start with common job roles in the automotive industry. Typically, we're starting with an apprentice technician. Now, apprentices, their roles include basic automotive inspections, gradually increasing their knowledge over the course of their apprenticeship. Dealerships commonly hire apprentice mechanics to service vehicles and support the technicians who do the more technical work. Moving up to technicians, automotive service technicians and mechanics are often called service technicians or service techs. They typically inspect, maintain, repair cars and small trucks as well. Further onwards, our diagnostic technician. The diagnostic technician deals with the inspection, maintenance, servicing and repair of vehicles. Technicians use diagnostic tools and identify the source of a problem and proceed to make the necessary adjustments and repairs. Workshop supervisor, as we move up the ladder slightly, the workshop supervisor is responsible for the day-to-day safe and efficient running of the mechanical workshop. The workshop manager is responsible for the quality of the work carried out and performs incoming, outgoing inspection on all parts and assemblies, sometimes delegates that work as well. So that would be your workshop supervisor. Just continuing on with that, working over towards the office part of the business, we have an accounts person. That person handles the financial processing of transactions for an organisation. Some of those duties include daily bookkeeping, record keeping, financial reporting, and also the preparation of tax records for financial audits. Accounts payable specialists will reconcile and verify invoices. So typically, every business has money coming in, money going out, and we typically need an accounts person to manage that process, just to keep a handle on the ongoing viability of the business and pay its bills. Onto the sales side of the business, most businesses have some sort of sales aspect related to it. Sales consultants usually excel in selling products and solutions. So they might not be selling a tangible product, but they might be selling a solution to a problem. So matching a client's need to what the company has to offer is a typical role of a salesperson. Onto our business owner. Of course, the business owner's job duties are quite broad, from hiring staff to arranging financing. Daily job duties might include reviewing sales reports, financials, comparing them to goals set out in short and long-term plans. So a business owner generally has a much longer-term view of what's going on and charts a course or a plan for the business to be operating in many years to come. And right down, or the last one I've got on my list here is a customer. last but very not least, a customer is any person who buys directly from the seller or the seller's agent or a broker, for argument's sake. In addition, a customer is the buyer of the seller's product. And we always have to remember, as a technician or any employee in any business, I think, is that the customer is the one that ultimately pays the bills, because they are the one that spend the money to keep the business going. So we've always got to look after our customers. Yeah, there's a quick overview of some of the roles, common roles in an automotive workplace. This brings us to workplace policies and procedures and codes of conduct. So typically in a workplace, we have a whole bunch of people, and we need some kind of guidelines and outlines and rules, policies and procedures within that workplace. So most commonly businesses have a code of conduct, and that would state the rules, the values, the ethical principles, and also a vision for a business. Having a code of conduct in the workplace provides staff with clear standards and expectations of how to do their job. The code of conduct should be followed whenever possible, and should be followed when employees are working or representing a business. Code of conduct will have the rules around all sorts of different behaviours, such as discrimination. I think you've all heard the word discrimination. Discrimination happens when a person's treated unfavourably because of his or her race or skin colour, national origin, gender, disability, religion or age. And certainly there's some more broader or extra things to add there as well. So there's a number of different types of discrimination. As an overview, it's against the law for someone to discriminate against you because of some sort of characteristic that you have or that someone assumes that you have. These personal characteristics could include age, carer and or parental status, could be a disability, including physical, sensory, intellectual disability, work-related injury, medical conditions, mental or psychological, or learning disabilities, or employment activity. So always remember, it's against the law to discriminate for those things. Also, still on discrimination, it's against the law to discriminate against gender identity, lawful sexual activity, sexual orientation, industrial activity, marital status, physical features, political belief or activity, pregnancy and breastfeeding, race, including colour, nationality, ethnicity and ethnic origin, religious belief or activity, personal association with someone who has or is assumed to have one of these characteristics. It's also against the law to sexually harass, victimise someone or to vilify someone because of their race or religion. If you want to know a little bit more about discrimination and the laws surrounding that, you can always look up the legislation on discrimination. So as far as a business goes, typically a business would have disciplinary policies, leave policies, and policies surrounding discrimination as well. So if you are found doing the wrong thing, there'll be some sort of policy around discipline. The purpose of a disciplinary policy is to set and maintain standards of conduct for a business, to manage disciplinary issues within the workplace, and in doing so, ensure that all employees are treated fairly and consistently. It's designed to help and encourage all employees to achieve and maintain satisfactory standards of conduct. All employers have leave policies as well, outlining the entitlement for employees to annual leave or other types of leave. There are many different reasons an employee may take leave. These usually include annual leave, and that's usually 20 days per year. There's sick leave, carers leave, compassionate leave, maternity leave, long service leave, and there's probably some more in there as well. So typically a business does have policies around that, and certainly entitlements around that as well. That brings us to violence, bullying and harassment. You've probably all heard those terms: violence, bullying, and harassment. Bullying is an ongoing misuse of power in a relationship through repeated verbal, physical, or social behaviour that causes physical or psychological harm. It can involve an individual or group misusing their power over one or more people. Bullying can happen in person or online. It can be obvious, overt, or hidden, covert. Bullying of any form or for any reason can have long-term effects on those involved, including bystanders. Single incidents and conflict or fights between equals, whether in person or online, are not defined as bullying. So I think the key is there: incidents and conflict or fights between equals is not defined as bullying. So bullying, as I just mentioned in the first paragraph there, is an ongoing misuse of power in a relationship. So if you have power over somebody else and then you exert on that person physical or psychological harm, that would be termed as bullying. Not bullying if you're equal to that person. An act of violence as well that causes or intended to cause harm. The damage inflicted by violence may be physical, psychological, or both. Violence may be distinguished from aggressive or more general type of hostile behaviour that may be physical, verbal, or passive in nature. So violence is something that we don't condone in business or certainly at the college. Harassment. So we've got bullying, violence, now harassment. Harassment covers a wide range of behaviours of an offensive nature and is commonly understood as behaviour that demeans, humiliates, or embarrasses a person and is unaccepted both socially and morally. All right, we're just sharing the next page now of our PowerPoint. We're talking about communication. So the previous slides were a little bit about an overview of workplaces and disciplinary policies and discrimination, workplace procedures, codes of conduct, and some job roles. Which brings us to communication. Now, we all know we have to communicate with others in a workplace, and there are techniques around communication. Some of those basic communication techniques are appropriate language, emphasis, to put an emphasis on a word, and also tone. Tone is very important in our language as well. We can speak in a monotone, which is quite a boring way of communicating, or we can put tone and inflection in our voices to make it more interesting and get our point across more clearly. Of course, appropriate language is right as well. We need to use the right language when we're describing something as well. We always must consider the other person. Communication is a two-way street. It's about the communicator, the person doing the communication, and it's also about the person receiving that communication as well. So in essence, there's four basic communication styles. They are passive, passive-aggressive, aggressive, and assertive. So as you can see on the screen there, four basic communication styles. Onto that first technique, appropriate language. It's really important to use language that fits your audience and matches the purpose. Inappropriate use of language can undermine your message or argument or alienate your audience. So every aspect of our life involves language. So language plays a really important role in the development of personality because communication drives our lives and helps to make ourselves better. So basically a language distinguishes humans from other animal species. Certainly other animals communicate in different ways, but of course us humans, we have language to make our communication better. So just on that first paragraph there, use the language that fits your audience and matches the purpose. So if I was talking to a customer, I think it's important to use easy easy to understand, plain English language. If I was a lawyer, for argument's sake, I might use big words and complicated and complex language. But if I was explaining to perhaps a customer about an automotive concept, excuse me, I would mostly likely use language that fits that particular audience and matches that purpose. So it's just a matter of using the right language at the right time. So just continuing on from appropriate language, number 2 there is emphasis. In writing and in speech, emphasis is the repetition of key words. So the repetition of key words will be placing an emphasis on that particular word or phrase, and the careful arrangement of those words to give them special weight and prominence within your communication. The most emphatic spot in a sentence is usually at the end. So that would be a good use of emphasis. Tone as well. The tone of your voice is your ability to change the meaning of the words you say by changing your pitch, intonation, volume, and tempo. If I just spoke in a monotone voice, one pitch, one tempo for the whole of this tutorial here, it'd get pretty boring. I'd like to think that with a change of pitch and volume and tempo, listeners are going to be more attentive and actually receive more of my communication. Listeners, someone receiving this communication would use sound to interpret my message. So being sensitive to how my tone is and your tone when you're communicating with others affects what those people can hear. Does make you a better communicator. If you listen to a newsreader or someone listening to the or reading the news on the TV, they are communicating those news stories to a massive audience. So they're a good example to watch if you want to know a little bit more about tone and emphasis and clear communication. On to the next tile here, common communication styles. Now we mentioned this a few moments ago. We have passive, passive-aggressive, aggressive, and assertive communication styles. So a passive communication style would be emotionally or classified or typically emotionally dishonest, indirect, inhibited, self-denying, blaming, and apologetic. So as a overview, you can see in small text at the bottom here, others' rights and needs would take precedence over mine. That would be a passive communication style. You may have heard of passive-aggressive, emotionally dishonest, indirect, self-denying at first, self-enhancing at the expense of others later. I subtly make clear that my rights and needs prevail. Aggressive would be categorised by inappropriately honest, direct, expressive, attacking, blaming, controlling, self-enhancing at the expense of others. I boldly insist that my rights and needs prevail. That would be an aggressive type communication style. And assertive. Now, assertive is, I think, commonly known as probably one of the best, if you like, type of communication. However, you may, in all sorts of situations, use some or parts of these others as well. But being assertive is appropriately honest, direct, self-enhancing, expressive, self-confident, empathetic to others, and the emotions of others involved in that communication as well. So assertive would be categorised as I clearly express that we both have rights and needs. So that'd be an assertive style of communication. Some fundamentals, just onto the next tile, fundamentals of working effectively with others. Another communication technique is active listening. Now, active listening is a technique that's used in communication, training, solving disputes or conflicts. It requires that the listener fully concentrate and understand, respond, and then remember what is being said. This is opposed to other listening techniques like reflective listening and empathetic listening. Active listening can create a flow of conversation rather than closed-mindedness. So it's about being active, not just as a listener. You're being a listener, but you're also assisting and helping to create a flow in communication. So flow means backwards and forward. So the active listening is more about being a little more active in your listening and asking simple questions to build trust and rapport. Some of those techniques is building trust and establishing rapport, demonstrating concern, paraphrasing to show understanding. Now, paraphrasing is just explaining back to the person who you're talking to or hearing that you have understood. You're paraphrasing what they've said to show that person that you have clearly understood what they are saying. Non-verbal cues, which show understanding, such as nodding, eye contact, and leaning forward, are all ways of demonstrating active listening. Brief verbal affirmations like I see, I know, thank you, and I understand are also some active listening techniques. It can help you communicate and help you help the other person can clearly understand what you're saying and help build rapport with that other person. And it lets them know that you do understand and you really are listening to them, which builds a great deal of self-confidence in that person to share what they're sharing with you. That brings us to the next page. If we're in an automotive workplace or any workplace for that matter, we will be working with others most likely. So very commonly in a business, we're establishing common goals. We have meetings and we have discussions with common goals in mind. I've just got some bullet points on this tile. Here are 7 steps to set goals for your team and ensure they're as effective as possible. So 7 steps to setting some goals for establishing common goals, that is. So first of all, we need to know what we want to achieve. So we need to set goals at team level and know your team members' strengths. Let people develop their own goals within the team. Set deadlines. So we need to have some sort of a deadline, or a goal's not a goal without a deadline, really. Track and progress on goals. So we need to know where we are in the scheme of things. Are we actually working towards the achievement of that goal, or are we off track? So we need to track our progress. We also, in a team, have to help others meet their goals. Might be something small you can do to assist somebody else to meet their goals. And of course, we all make mistakes from time to time, so we do have to learn from our mistakes. Sort of following on from establishing those common goals would be assigning roles. So within a workplace, we might need to identify team roles and clarify for individuals what exactly they have to do within that team. This sort of work encourages team members to take responsibility for their contribution to the overall team goals. Additionally, where one team member becomes unable to meet deadlines or if somebody leaves, it's easy to identify outstanding work and reallocate that work to somebody else. So when allocating roles and responsibilities, it's important to identify all the tasks that will need to be completed for the project. It's important to allocate tasks evenly amongst team members, making use of individual and team strengths. Ensure agreement from other team members taking on specified tasks. Provide frequent opportunities, feedback to team members from individuals, or reallocate roles and responsibilities only after agreement with all of the relevant team members. So that's allocating and assigning roles within a team. So on to the next tile, creating objectives and timelines. Creating objectives would be, to describe what that actually means, would be breaking down the overall job into smaller jobs through a group discussion to allocate the smaller jobs to the team member who can best handle that particular job and give consideration to the overall tasks required and the broader business objectives. Creating timelines is the next heading we've got here. That would be a matter of determining how much time the overall job will take and how much time the smaller parts will take when done individually. So timeline's a crucial part of objectives and goal settings as well. Needs to be, or typically is, limited by time. Sometimes we have conflicts. Onto the next tile. We need to resolve conflicts. If we just let conflicts go, they can sometimes turn into a larger issue and be much worse than just a quick conflict that's easy, a quick conflict, I should say, that's easy to resolve. So, same as communication requires skills, so resolving conflicts requires some skills and techniques as well. So I've got a few bullet points here. Tips to resolve conflicts. Number one would be identifying the conflict. It's the first step to dissecting it and resolving it. The biggest tip for resolving workplace conflict is not to avoid it. So we need to confront those conflicts, not aggressively, but certainly confidently. Control your emotions and behaviour. A crucial part of any communication is, to be able to control your own emotions and your own behaviour. So be mindful of things that you're saying and things that you're doing, your behaviours and your emotions, and learn to control those when in your communication. Create a space to talk out your differences. Create a space would mean create a space in your time and in your day, whether it's in the morning or the afternoon or whatever it might be. Just give yourself the room to be able to do it, the room and the time to talk out your differences with that other person. Pay attention to the feelings and the spoken words of others. So do have some empathy and do pay attention to the feelings of others. Really important to listen to what they've got to say. You will gain much more respect from your counterpart if you are understanding their feelings and you have genuine empathy. The next bullet point there is be aware and respect differences. It might be that you are very different from that other person, so pay attention and be aware of those differences and certainly respect those differences. It's the differences in this world that make it unique. Everyone is a little bit different. We're not all the same. It'd be a pretty boring place if we were all the same. So differences make our lives much more rich. So be aware and respect others' differences. Moving forward, agree on the next steps. So agree on what we can do to resolve something. If you just talk about it, that's great, but ultimately you need to have something come out of that particular meeting or that particular discussion, and that would be the next few steps. And forgive your co-workers and apologise where you need to and where appropriate. So that's a quick few tips on resolving conflicts. So methods for obtaining and giving feedback. In a workplace, quite often you're likely to be having some sort of formal and informal performance and appraisal. If you're an apprentice mechanic or you're new in a business, it might be that you have regular meetings and informal appraisals with your manager, and that gives them the opportunity to provide feedback and direction to an employee outside of a formal review meeting. In an automotive workplace, it's probably less likely you're going to have some sort of formal review meeting unless it's a particularly large organisation. But most of the time, I would say informal appraisals would happen pretty commonly in an auto workshop. So you're going to be talking to your boss about your performance. They should be giving you some feedback, and it's a great idea for you as an employee to give them some feedback as well about how you think you're going. So have a bit of a think about what you're doing in your workplace and how you can make better that communication with your boss. Just on to formal appraisals is a method used when a system is in place to report managerial impressions and observations on employee performance. It usually takes place in a formal meeting between a manager and employee, and is a method or a tool to improve the performance of each and every employee in the organisation. So ultimately, an organisation and its employees are all working towards the one goal. So a formal appraisal helps that process along the way. Just turn that phone off. It always rings in the middle of a meeting. Continuing on to verbal and non-verbal communication techniques, and also techniques for supporting work group members. Some examples of verbal communication and skills when giving feedback. So advising others regarding an appropriate course of action, assertiveness. These are verbal communication techniques. Conveying feedback in constructive manner, emphasising specific changeable behaviours, disciplining employees in a direct and respectful manner, giving credit to others, and recognising and countering objections as well. Some examples of non-verbal communication. So, of course, we have verbal and non-verbal. Now, talking, of course, is verbal. Non-verbal could be and is things like facial expressions, a smile or a frown. The human face is extremely expressive and able to convey countless emotions without even saying one word. You can see a little image in there, a little tile there. Your body language says you have lost interest. So if I see anybody there with their heads on the table, you can pretty much tell they've lost interest. Body movement and posture. You can sit up straight, or you can slouch, or you can sit up straight and be much more attentive. It all speaks. Everything says something. Everything does communicate. So you can't, in this life, we can't not communicate. We're always communicating something with our facial expressions and our body language. Goes on to talk about gestures as well, hand gestures. We can be quite expressive. Some races and types of people use their hands a lot. Eye contact, really important. It's really important to look at the camera when you're talking, not over there at something else. Really very important to be looking at the camera and looking at the person that you're talking to them. Make eye contact. Touch, space, so being close to somebody or being a little bit further apart is also important. People have their own personal boundaries when it comes to space. Voice, we can speak loudly, or we can speak nice and quietly, and pay attention to inconsistencies in your own communication as well. So that's some examples of verbal communication, non-verbal communication. Really important, non-verbal, they say a very high percentage of communication is non-verbal. So on to the next tile, supporting group members in your workplace. Some tips to do that, support group members would be share the group goal with each member, make people feel appreciated, support new ideas, give challenging tasks, encourage creativity, celebrate each success. It's really important to celebrate your successes. Encourage a good working environment and create and maintain a good team spirit. On to the next tile, we're talking about basic ethical principles and respect for others. I think you've probably all heard about morals and ethics. Ethical principles when you're at work or at home or wherever you might be is something that is very common, and respect for persons is one of the most fundamental principles of life. It is a recognition of a person as autonomous and unique and a free individual. It also means that we recognise that each person has the right and the capacity to make his or her own decisions. Respecting a person ensures that dignity is then valued. Along with that goes understanding and respecting cultural differences. Developing cultural self-awareness is something that we need to do. As a question, what influenced your own cultural identity? Learn to appreciate and value diverse views. Do not judge views that differ from yours. Do not judge those views as being wrong. They're just different. There's somebody else's view, which may not be the same as yours. Avoid imposing your own values on others. Resist stereotyping. Learn what you can and accept that you may be naive, meaning that you may not know everything about another person's values or beliefs. Yeah, that's all under the title or the heading, if you like, of basic ethical principles and basic respect for other humans, other people. Something really important in building rapport is identifying common ground. Now you have a look at the image that I've got down there. You see a blue person and a red person. Each person has some blue and some red in their minds or in their beliefs and the type of person they are. So if you're talking to somebody else, you'd be searching for those common ground or those common similarities that you might have with another person. That does assist greatly in providing a pathway of communication, which does lead to trust. You may have a lot of differences, but you also may have a lot of common ground. Through trust, friendship then can be established, and more difficult subjects can come up. It makes it a lot easier to then communicate with that person because you do have some common ground. That allows us or assists us to be true and authentic. On to our last tile for the day is personal presentation, attire, and grooming. I've just got a little image down the bottom. It's the same person dressed significantly differently. The individual on the left, the person dressed on the left, on my left, and your left too, I guess, is he's dressed like a doctor. He's got his stethoscope on, he's got a tie. And the other image, he's dressed quite differently. So your views of that person could be quite different based on just the way they're dressed. So personal presentation, the point of these two images is that personal presentation is a communication skill. It does matter. It's one of 5 important life and work skills you can build as a person. Personal presentation means the way you present yourself in everyday situations and more stressful situations like job interviews. Well, that brings us to the end of this presentation. You will have access to the assessment tool on the College Cloud as well. So you can now go and work through that assessment tool, the theory aspect of that. In there, you will find obviously a whole bunch of questions for your own knowledge. It's a great idea to go through this PowerPoint presentation again, have a read of it. Most of what you'll be looking for when you do that assessment will be contained in the PowerPoint presentation. So if you've got some questions, by all means, read it again, do some sort of study online, and you won't find that assessment too difficult. Once again, thanks for joining in, and that's the end of our session for today. Any questions, feel free to contact us at the college. Thanks again.